3. Good. Good. Oh, this one. Yeah, all right. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti 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 Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarva Vide Namaha. Very good. Welcome back. We'll start today with verse. That just stopped working. It'll come back. I want to review verse 3. Good. And before we do that, let's just set the context. Last week, we saw the opening portion of chapter 9, Sukshmata and Vyapita. We're taught in that chapter. Sukshmata, subtleness. Vyapita, pervasiveness. And we went through a prakriya, teaching methodology, that started with the most gross element of earth, and then step by step proceeded through the elements, through the sthula bhutas, physical elements, through the sukshma bhutas, through the subtle elements. I'll wait for everyone to be seated. So step by step, we proceeded from the most gross to the most subtle, and it was a process of increasing subtlety, increasing pervasiveness, which really means increasingly free from attributes. And that's the purpose of this whole prakriya. And that is, usually when you want to know something, you want to know, well, what is it? If you tell someone you got a new car, what will be the next question? Right? What kind of car? They want to know the attributes of the car. What is the make of the car? Is it a hybrid car or an electric car? They want to know these details. They want to know all the attributes. Generally, when we want to know something in our daily lives, we want to know the attributes of it. Here, we're dealing with a reality that is nirguna, attribute-free. And that's utterly unlike any other field of inquiry. That is, every other field of inquiry is a pursuit of attributes. Here, it's a pursuit of that which is without attributes, utterly without attributes, nirguna. So the opening portion of this chapter made extensive use of logic in this prakriya, in this teaching methodology, to lead you step by step in a process of negating attributes. Negate, negate, negate. And a final comment here is that the power of logic in Advaita Vedanta is not to prove your true nature to be sat-chit-ananda. In fact, your true nature cannot be proved to be anything because it lies outside the realm of logic. The truth of who you are as a conscious being, that consciousness truly being unborn, uncreated, limitless, all-pervasive, that consciousness is not available for logic. What is available for logic is attributes. So what we did in last week's class is, or what Shankaracharya did in last week's class, is so skillfully to use, it's like using a scalpel to carve away all the attributes until what's left is attribute free. So the scalpel of logic is used to remove attributes, leaving us with what is attribute free. And then where we ended, the end of this third verse, we're back to consciousness speaking to us in the first person. Aham, ekaha, I am one, sada, eternal. So this is consciousness. Shankara puts these words in the mouth, so to speak, of consciousness. And mouth, so to speak, because consciousness can't have words. Consciousness has no thoughts. Consciousness can't speak to us. This is called a rhetorical device, a teaching device. So that being said, we can continue to verse 4. Brahmadhyastavarantaye, Brahmadhyastavarantaye, pranino mama puh smrataha, pranino mama puh smrataha, kama krodhadayo dosha, kama krodhadayo dosha, jayeran me kuton yataha, jayeran me kuton yataha. Start in the second line. Praninaha puhu. Prani, living being. Praninaha, plural. The that's genitive. So, of living beings, they're puhu. Puhu is such an interesting word. For our Sanskrit students, it comes from pur, which is a form of puram. Puram you may recognize as city. Here, pur is also city, and here, plural, puhu. And of course, we're not talking about cities, but it's a common metaphor to call the body the city of 9 gates. You've heard that expression? The body is a city of 9 gates. If you count the number of openings, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, and below the waist, if you add them up, you'll come to 9 apertures, as it were. 9 gateways, they're called. So the body is called the city of these 9 gates, and therefore here called puhu. So praninaha bhuhu, the bodies of living beings, first line, yea, those of living beings which are brahmadhyaha, from brahmaji, stavarantaha, down to an unmoving living being, like a blade of grass. So from Brahmaji, the most exalted living being, down to a blade of grass, they all have bodies. But now, Atma speaking to us, Atma says that those bodies are mama, mine. Smrataha. This is understood. Remember, it means understood. This is understood that the bodies of all living beings are mine. What does that mean? Many of you have seen, even in Bhagavad Gita, similar language, where the consciousness which abides in every being, the same consciousness abides in your body, same consciousness abides in my body. So if that consciousness could speak, why not? You can say, that body is mine, that body is mine, every body is mine. That's the language used here. It's a language, in Sanskrit we call it sarvatma. Sarva, atma, the atma of sarva, of all. Consciousness speaks to us here as sarvatma, the self of all, the indwelling consciousness of all. And this is based on our prior discussion that established that this consciousness has no attributes like locality. Where is consciousness? It's not in a particular place. It's like saying, where is space? We use the word all-pervasive, sarva vyapaka, to describe space in this. So space is all-pervasive because it's attribute-free. It has no edge, it has no boundary, it has no location. Consciousness, same. No edge, no boundary, no location. It's inside you, but it's not only inside you. In fact, we've made this observation many times. Instead of saying consciousness is inside your body, it's much more accurate to say your body is inside consciousness. Is that not so? Yes, it's true. Consciousness is in your body, but that consciousness is all pervasive. So let's correct our language and say your body exists within all pervasive consciousness. And for this reason, the consciousness goes on. It's almost like if consciousness could complain. Consciousness complains here, why do you think I'm angry and full of desires? So this is consciousness complaining. So I'm making a joke here. So consciousness complains here, kama krodhadayaha doshaha. Doshaha, defects, like kama, desire, krodha, etc., jayeran me, they arise in me. So this is his complaint. So defects like desire and anger arise in me, apparently arise in me. Kutaha anyataha, from where else could they arise but these bodies? Consciousness abiding in your body gets blamed for anger and desire. And consciousness here complains, don't blame me. The problems belong to your body and mind. And this is a topic that we'll see in the next several verses, and that is, remember that we've used the word upadhi. Upadhi translated by scholars as limiting adjunct, and the sense is that pot is an upadhi for clay, which means that clay, which is formless, appears in the form of pot due to this potness. So we'll call potness the upadhi. The pot is an upadhi, meaning that the attributes of the pot are superimposed on the clay. So this is our typical thing. Maybe better to use our mind and consciousness. Your mind is an upadhi for consciousness. Now, it's a little subtle. Watch this. This pot is a form of clay. Thoughts are a form of, right, consciousness. Pot is a form of clay. Thoughts are a form of consciousness. So pot is an upadhi for the clay. Thoughts are upadhi for consciousness, leading to us to call this a pot. It's only clay. In the same way we think of our experiences as thoughts. In fact, the content of every thought is consciousness. The content of this pot is clay. The content of every thought is consciousness, pure consciousness. And what we're going to see, and what's said at the end of this verse, and we'll see it in the future verses, is that attributes of the upadhi are superimposed on the substratum called adhisthana, or technical Sanskrit words. So the attributes of your thoughts get superimposed on the consciousness, which is your true nature. If you have thoughts with kama and krodha, desire and anger, that desire and anger gets superimposed on consciousness, which is the essence of you, and that's why you say, I am angry, which is incorrect. The true I is consciousness. The truth of who you are is consciousness. That consciousness doesn't get angry. You're not angry. There are angry thoughts in your mind. That's a fact. The fact is, angry thoughts are in your mind. And those angry thoughts don't affect consciousness at all. We've had these kinds of discussions before. So this is what consciousness is complaining about. When you say, I am angry, consciousness complains, hey, don't call me angry. Anger doesn't belong to me. It belongs to your body and mind. Okay, continuing. Where am I here? There. Yes. Bhuta doshai sada sprishtam. Bhuta doshai sada sprishtam. Sarva bhutastamishwaram. Sarva bhutastamishwaram. Nilam vyoma yatha balo. Nilam vyoma yatha balo. Dushtam mam vikshate janaha. Dushtam mam vikshate janaha. In the second line, Atma continues and says, he is talking about Ishvara. Atma is the Ishvara, the master. Sarva bhutastham, dwelling in every living being. The Lord who dwells in every living being, that consciousness is sada, the first line, sada asprishtam. You have to break these words apart properly. Sada, always, asprishtam, untainted, untouched. The consciousness which dwells within all beings is always untainted, bhuta doshaihi, by the defects of those living beings. So the defects of your body and mind don't affect consciousness whatsoever. If your body is ill, how does that affect consciousness? It affects your body tremendously. If your mind is disturbed, it doesn't affect consciousness. Consciousness is a different kind of reality that remains utterly unaffected by what happens to body and mind, just like clay is a different kind of reality than pot. The reality of pot belongs to the realm of nama rupa, name and form. And whatever happens to this pot is confined to the realm of nama rupa, which means if this pot gets broken, the broken pot is a fact in the realm of nama rupa, but what about in the realm of clay? In the realm of clay, there's no effect whatsoever. These are our two different levels of reality. Absolute reality, which is the clay, and apparent reality, which is the reality of the pot. So we use the word real for the clay, satyam. We use the word mithya, false, for the pot. And of course, false in this sense is we use the word mithya in a very technical sense here. We mean it's a lesser reality. And when I say less real, this is a topic that comes up from time to time. We measure reality in terms of persistence. Our final definition of reality is trikala baditam, that which exists in past, present, and future without distinction. So that which is more real, that which is most real, is that which exists in past, present, and future without distinction. That which is less real is that which doesn't necessarily exist in all those three conditions. So here, before the pot existed, clay existed. After the pot no longer exists, clay exists. So pot, based on this, pot is less real than the clay. So if I want to be able to use the term more real and less real, so we've just defined it in this sense, the pot is less real than the clay. Your body comes and goes, your mind comes and goes, thoughts come and go. They are all less real than consciousness, which does not come and go. And we're going to see that in coming verses. So here he gives a metaphor for this confusion where we superimpose attributes of the upadhi, get superimposed on the underlying reality, like when you superimpose anger on consciousness. Remember, consciousness is I. The ultimate meaning of I is consciousness. You are a conscious being, in the most basic sense. So when you say, I am angry, you have superimposed the anger that belongs to thoughts in your mind. You have superimposed it on consciousness. And here, consciousness speaking to us gives us a lesson and says that is yata balaha in the third line. It's like a child who says that vyoma, space, is neelam, dark blue. So when you look up at the night sky, you see this dark blue bowl with these little points of light poking through. That's what a child sees. So the blueness of the sky gets superimposed on space by a child. And why by a child? The child doesn't know better. Ignorance. Due to ignorance, superimposition takes place due to ignorance. You superimpose the snake on the rope in the dark alley. You superimpose the snake on the rope because of ignorance of the rope. If you knew it was a rope, you wouldn't superimpose the snake on it. In the same way, due to failure to recognize your true nature as pure consciousness, you superimpose the anger in your mind, you superimpose on yourself. If you knew, I am unchanging consciousness, if you knew that so vividly, I am unchanging consciousness, could you say, I am angry? You couldn't say it. So if you do say, I am angry, it means that understanding, I am unchanging consciousness, is not complete for you, which is why these classes continue. All right. So the consciousness is complaining here again. He says, just like a child thinks that that space is blue, he says, in the same way, janaha, people, vikshate, people see or people think, mam dushtam, that I am defective. So he's complaining. Consciousness complains, just like a child superimposes the blueness of the sky on space, which is colorless. In the same way, consciousness complains, people superimpose the defects of body and mind on me. Remember, this whole chapter is on consciousness being nirguna, attribute-free. How can you superimpose these attributes like anger. How can you superimpose them on what is ultimately attribute-free nirguna chaitanya consciousness, which is free from attributes? Then, matchaitanyavabhasyatvat, matchaitanyavabhasyatvat, sarva pranidhiyam sada, sarva pranidhiyam sada, purmama pranina sarve, purmama pranina sarve, sarvajñasya vipapmanaha, sarvajñasya vipapmanaha. Start in the third line, where he continues, he, being consciousness, continues to speak as sarvatma, the self of all, the consciousness which dwells in all beings. And for this reason, he says in the third line, sarve praninaha, all living beings, of praninaha, of all living beings, they're puhu, sarve puhu, all the bodies, there's that word puhu again, all the bodies of living beings, he says in the second time now, he says they are mama, they are mine. The bodies of all living beings are mine, that one consciousness abiding in all beings, and he says they are mine, and then he describes himself as the one who is sarvajña, I, the one who am all-knowing, the knowledge, the sarvajña we often translate as omniscient. That's the most common interpretation of the word sarvajña, the one who knows all. But Sanskrit grammar allows a different interpretation of that compound. The knower who is in all. You could either be the knower of all, omniscient, or the knower who is in all, the consciousness who dwells in all beings. Both meanings are possible for that term. And he says, I who am sarvajña, either omniscient or all-pervasive. And he says, I am vipapmanaha, free from sin, free from attributes like space. Space doesn't have blueness. If there's smoke in the air, pollution in the air, space is untainted, unaffected by all those attributes. Space being, relatively speaking, nirguna. So he says, I, the one who am all-pervasive consciousness, untouched by all worldly attributes, I abide in the bodies of all. Therefore, all bodies are mine. And as we said, this is a statement of sarvatma bhava. Bhava, the state of being sarva atma, the state of being the self of all. And then he explains a little bit further. Why can he say that so boldly? He says, because sarva pranidhiyam, the mind, dhi here means buddhi, mind. Sarva pranidhiyam, the minds of all living beings are mat chaitanya avabhasya. They are avabhasya, they are illumined by mat, my, chaitanya, my consciousness. So nice to put this in the first person. Atma addresses us, and Atma says, I am the consciousness that is present in your mind. Let me put more words into Atma's mouth here. Atma says, I am the consciousness because of which you know what's happening right now. You know what's happening around you. Why? Because of my consciousness, Atma says. You know what's happening in your mind right now. How? Because of my consciousness. Atma says, I am the consciousness that reveals the activities of all minds. Why? Atma being nirguna, free from attributes, free from boundaries, free from edge, free from location, therefore all pervasive. So that one all-pervasive, this is such a basic teaching of Advaita Vedanta and a crucial teaching. One all-pervasive consciousness is manifest in every person's mind, and the typical metaphor, even the commentator refers to our famous metaphor of one sun shines on many buckets of water. You've heard me give this metaphor before. The commentator himself refers to it. It's like there are about 50 of us here, so 50 buckets of water outside. Bucket represents your physical body. The water inside the bucket represents your sukshma sharira, mind, etc. One sun gets reflected in these 50 buckets, but not identically. If you look in a bucket, and one bucket might have very still water, and the sun is reflected in a very pristine manner. Another bucket might have agitated water. The sun is reflected in an agitated manner. A third bucket might have polluted water, and that taints the reflection. Obviously, this is a metaphor for sattva, rajas, and tamas. These three attributes belong to the sun or belong to the water? Water, right? Water represents your mind. Your mind has these three gunas. These attributes belong to your mind. They don't belong to the consciousness which illumines your mind. Just like the attributes of the water don't affect the sun that shines upon it. But just to finish that metaphor, I think the most powerful part of that metaphor, which is often overlooked, is that what we call experience can be understood very well as a reflected sun in the water. Your experience is a product of two factors. One is consciousness, the other is mind. That's it. What is experience? How rarely this is discussed. What is experience? Experience is consciousness plus mind. The sun is reflected by the water. The nature of the water is apparent. The nature of the water seems to affect the sun, but that's an apparent effect because you're only seeing a reflection of the sun. So we could say then, in fact, in more technical terms, reflected consciousness is experience. What is experience? Consciousness reflected or manifest by your mind and thoughts in particular. So, okay, that's done. Let's continue. Okay, we've just finished this discussion of sarvatma bhava, consciousness being the one self that dwells in all beings. And now the topic shifts to reality. This consciousness is absolutely real. And again, what was our definition of reality? Trikala abaditam, that which abides, present, past, future, without interruption. And that's our next topic. Janimat jnana vigneyam, janimat jnana vigneyam, swapna jnana varishyate, swapna jnana varishyate, nityam nirvishayam jnanam, nityam nirvishayam jnanam, tasmat dvaitam na vidyate, tasmad-dvaitam na vidyate. Jani-mat, you have to break the words apart properly. Jani-mat jnana-vigneyam. Jani-mat, that which is born. Janma is birth. Jani-mat, that which is born. Now, that which is born is how real. Based on our definition, anything born is less real. Anything that's subject to, because anything born is also subject to death. It comes and goes. So jani-mat, anything that arises, anything that's born, is jnana vigneyam. Anything that's born is subject to jnana and vigneya. It is an object that is known. An object that is known, it is objectified and thereby known. Anything born can be an object known to you. Anything born, which is an object known to you, and he gives a metaphor here, swapna jnanavat ishyate. He says like objects in a dream. So when you dream, many objects are born. And of course, all those objects go away. So if the objects are born in a dream and they go away in a dream, how real are they? Now, I'm smiling now because I remember an argument of Gaudapada. This is a very wild argument. Here's Gaudapada, you remember, is Shankara's guru's guru. So he argued like this: anything that comes and goes is real. All of your experiences in dreams come and go. What about your waking experiences? They also come and go. When you go to sleep tonight, what happens to the waking world? It's gone. So according to Gaudapada, your waking experiences are no more real than your dream experiences. They all come and go. And Gaudapada deliberately blurs the line between dream and waking. He says, how much difference is there? Everything is coming and going. There is a difference, but to make his point, he blurs the distinction and he says everything is transient, everything comes and goes, both in waking state and dream state. Therefore, none of it is real. And that's the same kind of argument that's used here by Shankaracharya in his text. Of course, his words put into the mouth of consciousness. Consciousness says that anything that's born comes and goes. It's not real, like objects in a dream. And now he concludes in the third line, nityam nirvashayam jnanam. But jnanam. Here jnanam not in the sense of something known. Jnana means knowledge, but not in the sense of particular knowledge, but here it's used as consciousness. Frequently in Advaita Vedanta, the word jnana, or knowledge, is used as consciousness. Be ready for that. That's what's happening here. So jnanam here means consciousness. That consciousness is nirvishayam, it's independent of objects. Consciousness is not an object. It's the opposite of an object. It's the subject. Consciousness is that by which all objects are known. If we categorize the world into two categories, one category is objects which are known. The other category is the subject, the knower. Subject and objects. Consciousness and objects. So he says here that consciousness is nirvishayam. In which category? The object category or the subject category? In the subject category. Consciousness is not an object. Consciousness is a knowing subject. And that consciousness is nityam. And that's the key here. Notice that nityam is the opposite of janimat in the first line. Janimat is that which is born. Nityam is that which is unborn. Eternal means unborn, uncreated. Tasmat, therefore, dvaitam na vidyate. It seems like a jump of logic. It says, therefore, duality does not exist. This is a little bit like Gaudapada, blurring lines. So it's not really a jump when you consider na vidyate does not exist, means it's not real. And what does it mean to be less real? To be more real means more persistent. Less real means less persistent. That which comes and goes. Every object in your dream comes and goes. Therefore, how real is it? In your waking state, everything you experience comes and goes. The entire waking state is transient. So therefore, objects in the dream state are not absolutely real. Objects in the waking state, similarly, are not absolutely real. There was a time when this chair did not exist. There will be a time when this chair no longer exists. Everything we experience in waking and dream are transient and therefore less real. Now he says na vidyate, they don't exist, and here we have to interpret a little bit when he says they don't exist as realities. You can't say this chair doesn't exist. I mean, this is a common misinterpretation of Advaita Vedanta where people say everything is illusion. And that's quite incorrect. The word mithya and maya, all such words, do not mean illusion. Illusion is when you see the sun going down. The sun doesn't go down. Illusion is when you see the blue space. Those are illusions. There's no such thing as blue space. Space is colorless. The sun doesn't go down. Illusion is that with, my favorite example, illusion is the elephant in my hand. Now the question is the elephant in my hand the same as the chair on which I'm sitting? Neither one are real. But they're different kinds of unrealities, right? The elephant in my hand is atyanta abhava. It is absolutely non-existent. The chair on which I'm sitting is not real, nor is it absolutely unreal. Fortunately, we have a word to describe that intermediate state of reality. We call it mithya. That's the value of that word. It's such an important word and often misunderstood. Mithya, then, is an intermediate state of reality in between absolute non-existence and absolute reality. Mithya, we call it apparent existence. So here when he says navidyate, he is not referring to absolute non-existence. He says it is mithya. It's not absolutely real. Everything you experience in a dream comes and goes. Everything you experience in a waking state comes and goes. Therefore, all that is mithya. It is not absolutely real as compared to consciousness, which is nityam, unborn, uncreated. In fact, he talks about that more in the very next verse. He explains that. Jnatur jnatir hi nityokta Jnatur jnatir hi nityokta sushupte tvanya shunyataha sushupte tvanya shunyataha jagrat jnatistva vidyatas jagrat jnatistva vidyatas tadgrahyam chasadishyatam tadgrahyam chasadishyatam. Jnatuhu jnatihi. Interesting choice of words. Jnati here means consciousness. Jnatuhu means of the knower. Jnatra, for our Sanskrit students, is knower. Here, jnatuhu, genitive, of the knower. Jnatuhu jnatihi, the consciousness of the knower, he, indeed, is nitya ukta. Ukta, it is said, but you have to break those words apart. Nitya ukta. The consciousness of the knower is ukta, is said to be nitya, unborn, uncreated, unchanging. It is said. It is said where? This word jnatuhu is well known from a passage in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, a passage which says, Nahi drashtuhu viparilopaha vidyate avinashitvat. It says, drashtuhu, for the seer, for consciousness, na viparilopaha vidyate, there is no absence, ever. There is no loss. Viparilopaha, no absence, no loss, of consciousness at any time whatsoever. Avinashitvat, because consciousness is not subject to destruction. Consciousness doesn't blink on and off. The term that's often used is alupta drik. Drik, the seer, which is alupta. Alupta is here viparilopa, same root as what's used in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad here. And I have to share this with you. We found it hilarious then. When Pujya Swamiji was teaching us this passage from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, he wanted to demonstrate what is a alupta drik, a seer that never ceases to see. Seeing without interruption. And he liked to demonstrate things, so he made up a mudra, a alupta drik mudra, what is the word? Incessant seer. And what is the alupta drik mudra? This, the alupta drik mudra. Invented by Pujya Swami Dayananda. But very vividly, it conveys the sense of seeing that never ceases. And your consciousness is a seer, a witness that never ceases to be the witness, which is what this famous passage in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says. It says, drashtuhu, for that awareful witness, viparilopaha na vidyate, there is no cessation, even for a moment. There's no momentary lapse of that consciousness, even in deep sleep, which is what he says in the second line. Sushupte, to break up the words tu and anyashunyataha. Tu, but in sushupte, in deep sleep, there is anyashunyataha, because of the absence of anything else. And he's very cryptically and briefly referring to a very profound Vedantic analysis of deep sleep. Your consciousness does not cease to exist in deep sleep. In deep sleep, you are, it's counterintuitive. In dreamless sleep, you are every bit as conscious as you are right now. And that may be odd, that may sound odd for many people, because we constantly associate consciousness with the mind and brain, just like medical doctors associate consciousness with mind and brain. But we're using consciousness in a very fundamental sense here. Right now, consciousness means that by which you are aware of what's happening. You are aware of what's happening right now in a waking state. In dream, you are aware, fully aware. Would you say that you're less conscious in a dream or more, or same? Right. In fact, consciousness has no degrees. Let's make this as a side point, but an important side point. There's no such thing as being more conscious or less conscious. And let me address a common experience. Many of us, including me, wake up feeling dull, drowsy. I need that cup of coffee. So you wake up in the morning and you say, my consciousness is dull. Wrong. Then you say, after my cup of coffee, then my consciousness is bright. Wrong. Why is that wrong? Tell me, how did you know your consciousness was dull? How did you know your consciousness got bright? That's consciousness. What was dull and what became bright is not consciousness, it's your mind. So it's not that consciousness is dull and becomes bright, it's your mind that's dull and then wakes up. Consciousness is unchanging. That unchanging consciousness reveals whatever is happening right now while you're awake. That unchanging consciousness reveals whatever is happening in your dreams. And that unchanging consciousness reveals the absence of mental activities in deep sleep. People argue about this, and I'm a little puzzled because when you really get it, it's counterintuitive to say that consciousness is aware of every single moment while you're awake. Consciousness is aware of every single moment while you're dreaming, and then suddenly consciousness decides to blink off in deep sleep. I find that counterintuitive. It's a little bit like saying, and you've heard me give this metaphor, it's like saying, I went into a dark closet and I lost my power of eyesight. Then I got out of the dark closet and I magically regained my power of eyesight. Does that make sense? But that's what it is when people claim that your consciousness ceases to exist in deep sleep. It really is counterintuitive. In that dark closet, you don't lose your power of sight. You see, there's nothing to be seen. In the same way, in deep sleep, you are conscious, consciousness without an object. Consciousness, nothing to be aware of. So that's what he says. And then he concludes here, Jagrat jnatihi tu avidyataha. Tadgrahyam cha asat ishyate. So he wants to distinguish here that consciousness is alupta drik, the unceasing observer of whatever is happening in your mind. Being unceasing, that's our definition of real. But whatever is being observed comes and goes, so is less real. And that's what he's talking about, Jagrat jnatihi, waking consciousness. Your experience right now, your experience of what's happening around you in the room, that experience comes and goes. In fact, our class will be over in 5 minutes, and that experience will be over. So anything that comes and goes is not absolutely real. Here he calls it Jagrat Jnatihi. Consciousness of waking activities, he says, is avidyataha. It is due to ignorance. If you take it as being real, you've made a mistake. It's not absolutely real, apparently real. It has that middle level of reality. It's not absolutely unreal like the elephant. It's not absolutely real either. It has that intermediate state, mithya. And tadgrahyam, anything observed by that consciousness, cha asad ishyate, is understood as not absolutely real. Anything you experience comes and goes. All your waking experiences come and go. All your dream experiences come and go. And the absence of experience in deep sleep also comes and goes. So what doesn't come and go is consciousness. That alupta drik, that unceasing observer, that is reality. And then he concludes the chapter, Shankaracharya concludes the chapter with going back to the beginning, that attributelessness. What a word. Attributelessness. Nirgunatva, freedom, the state of being free from attributes, which is how we started the chapter and how we end the chapter. Rupavattvadya satyat, Rupavattvadya sattvana, Rupavattvadya sattvana, Drishtyadir karmata yata, Drishtyadir karmata yata, Evam vijnana karmatvam, Evam vijnana karmatvam, Bhumno nastiti gamyate, Bhumno nastiti ganyate. So he concludes by talking about Atma or Brahman being nirguna, free from attributes. And he makes this very important observation. Suppose something has no rupa. Rupa can mean form, but its first meaning is actually color. If you look up rupa in a dictionary, meaning number 1 is color. Meaning number 2 is probably form. So suppose something is transparent. If it's transparent, it has no color, it has no form, then how can you know it? That which has no color or form cannot be perceived because your eyes pick up color and form. A fully transparent object that has no color or form whatsoever can't be perceived by your eyes because of the absence of color and form, the absence of qualities. So he's using this as a metaphor. He says in the second line, yata, just as drishtyadehi, for your powers of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, there is na karmata. They cannot objectify rupavattvadi asattva, that which is without form, etc. That which has no, I'll paraphrase, the language is a little complicated. The meaning is quite simple. That which has no attributes cannot be perceived. That's all he is saying. That which is attribute-free cannot be perceived. Why? Because our 5 senses pick up attributes, right? So that which is, so attributes like form and color. So that which is utterly free from attributes, like a transparent object, we have to have fun with this. Suppose I'm holding in my hand a transparent globe, which makes no sound, has no smell, and you can't taste it. Then how can you experience it? If it has no attributes, it cannot be experienced. It cannot be objectified, this transparent globe. And he uses that as a metaphor. Evam, in the same way, vijnana karmatvam nasti bhumnaha gamyate. Bhumnaha, for bhuman. Bhuman is a Upanishadic word for Brahman. Brahman or atma, that which is vast. So for atma, which is free from qualities, there is no vijnana karmatvam. I have to give you the whole verse. It ties together as one. Just like an object which has no attributes cannot be perceived, in the same way, atma, being utterly free from attributes, cannot be an object of your knowledge. Notice here we have two different kinds of objects. One is an object of your senses. So the first half talks about objects of your senses. That which has no attributes cannot be an object of your senses. Second half talks about Atma. Atma also has no attributes. But we're not talking about an object of your senses, an object of your mind. Atma cannot be objectified. Atma cannot be conceived. Atma cannot be witnessed. To go back to our prior discussion, why can Atma not be witnessed? Because Atma is the witness. You get that? So Atma cannot be observed or objectified or witnessed because that Atma is the awareful witness. That Atma is the consciousness that's aware of everything else. Leading to this last observation for today's class. How many people have said or wrote that in deep meditation, Atma will arise as 1,000 burning suns with that kind of light? Anything that arises in your mind during meditation, by definition, is not Atma, right? Anything you observe in meditation or any time is not Atma, because Atma is the observer. And with this, we conclude our class. We'll meet next week and we'll move on to chapter 10. Each one of these chapters is different and wonderful. I've started preparing chapter 10, and you will be delighted when we get there. Okay. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya, om shanti shanti shanti. Om tat sat. Very nice.